Hi everyone. This is a discussion this morning between Jane, the grief guide, and Tracy, the grief whisperer. We're going to be talking about lots of things associated with our thoughts, our well-being, and feeling better on a longer journey. Usually, because things, particularly if stress comes into our lives, we very often end up having to have a long-term journey, and that's why we've called it each and every day beginning to feel better and better and better, because it's a long-term journey, particularly with grief and just in self-development as well. It's a long-term journey. So that's what we are going to be talking about today. Right, Jane, would you like to start with just introducing who you are?
Yeah, my name's Jane Anderson, and I'm a grief guide. And I started my business journey with Janie in August last year. And that came about due to personal experience. Um, and yeah, my aim is to transform people's lives by showing compassion, guidance, and making people comfortable with being seen, heard, and respected. So that's a sort of a very brief kind of that is me as I am now. I don't know how far you want me to go into my
That's
backstory, Tracy, but it's just
I'm
kind of,
sure that will all come out. It's just introducing who you are and what you do for now.
yeah.
So that's fine.
So
That's
that's
great.
me.
I'm Tracy Jane. I'm the grief whisperer. I am the creator of the Lost Cafe, where people can come and ask questions about grief and just generally be supported by the grievers. I'm also a grief whisperer, qualified grief coach and bereavement specialist. So I understand about a lot of bereavements, personal loss, more than loss of jobs and things. I tend to focus on personal loss. And I'm just going to try and relate some of this and give us some strategies with what Jane's going to come up with so that we can view our journey in a much more positive way, that you can feel better through grief and grow through grief. So Jane, do you want to start with what you want to talk about first?
Yeah, well, I don't know whether it probably is useful for people to have a little bit of background as to why I'm actually here.
Yeah.
Um, I started life off as a farmer's daughter, married a farmer, and moved to the family farm up in the hills of Northumberland. And yeah, life was hunky dory, shall we say, up until 2020, 2021. Mum had liver failure, and we had to nurse her through palliative care. And then she died in January of 22. And we know life throws curveballs, and life is life, isn't it? We can't all live forever. And that was fine, you know, moved on. And 2022 was just one thing after another, as they say, curveball after curveball. And people talk about a traumatic event in your life. Mine ended up being probably 6 or 7 traumatic things in my life. 2 hip replacements. I had both my hips replaced. Mum dying in the January, and we lost 3 close family friends in that space of time as well. And probably the biggest bombshell was actually losing my husband in September of 2022. So I know this may trigger people that I'm talking about it, but if we don't talk openly about these things happening, I feel that people need to talk and be aware of, how things are. And my aim is to go out there as me, as a person, help people, guide them, and go take them through the process that I went through to get to where I am now. Um, and I have to say, overnight, after losing Jonathan, my husband, my identity just, well, it wasn't overnight. It was like as soon as it happened, total loss of identity. And actually, no longer a farmer's wife. And that is like a 24/7 rule, even though I worked elsewhere. No longer a farmer's wife, no longer a wife, no longer the support network for the farm. And yeah, I just, as I reflect back now, I think actually I was just kind of like, oh, where am I? Who am I now? Um, and it was through a friend that I was guided to mentorship. And hands up, no idea what mentorship was, what it was going to do for me, whether it would work, whether not a Scooby Doo is the only way to describe it, but I needed something. I looked for other things, and I think that's the whole reason we're here, is like a different kind of way to approach things, Tracy.
Very much so.
And yeah, and I think, for me, it was like, yeah, I'm going to dive in. And I never ever thought I would start studying again. I thought that my studying days were over, and I totally embraced it. And it was basically understanding my mentor would not like to hear me say basically, but it is understanding the scientific process of the mind, a like-minded community, a support network, and yeah, understanding the scientific processes of mind and how you can use that to help you as a person. So that is sort of where I'm at and how I never ever thought I would start a business, but my passion to actually be able to go out and help people and be that person that people go, oh, I'll maybe just have a quick chat with Jane because I'm feeling a bit, not sure what I'm doing. So yeah, to be able to go out and speak to people and listen, actively listen to people.
Mm.
People need people to talk to. So yes, that's me, expert by experience, and the qualifications of my mentor and her programs to support what I do.
I loved what you said there about validation and identity, because we need to talk to others. That's how we get our, something really important in grief is to get our grief validated and our feelings and acknowledge that we're feeling that way, because that makes a whole difference to the whole grief game. So that's really important, to go out and talk to other people and show other people that it's okay to talk about it. It's one of the 6 things that researchers say we need to do, is talk about our grief. So that's really important. And I can totally relate to the identity thing, because my story comes from losing my father-in-law and my godmother together within 6 months. And my godmother was like my second mum, because my mum worked a lot. So she practically brought me up. So when I
Yeah.
lost her, I didn't really know who I was. I
Hmm.
sort of, it was like there was something missing and I couldn't always place me every day.
Yeah.
And then also my father-in-law, we nursed him through Parkinson's and dementia. So he got worse and worse. And we saw the effect it had on mum.
Mm.
And actually, it was almost like we'd already lost him before he'd even gone. So
Yeah.
I do understand all that side of things. And that was then juggling responsibility for others, keeping others safe, and feeling really like what's going on here, because it's like you get run over by a train or a bus or a lorry,
Yeah.
because your brain, nothing functions.
No.
And so that's how I've ended up being a grief coach, because my meaning and purpose, which is another thing we need, one of the 6 things we need is meaning and purpose. Like you, I've started a business, and I am a qualified grief coach, qualified grief counselor. So that has given me purpose, and it's made sense of my godmother's life, because she
Yeah.
was just so people orientated. And she had this amazing laugh. When you went in a room, her laugh just, you'd hear it the other side of the room. So that stays with me. And when I'm working with people, I know that I'm fulfilling a purpose. So that
Yeah.
really helps me with my grief. It's coming up to 3 years for me. And
Yeah.
I still get difficult days, but they're a lot easier knowing I'm helping others who have been through what, or going through what I've been through.
Yeah.
So I completely relate to that, finding a reason to keep
Yeah.
going and to develop ourselves, because it
Yeah.
does really make the grief a lot more understandable. And I loved what you said as well about the scientific process. If we know what our minds and bodies are doing in grief, then we can find a solution, because we know how something works. You can then fix it. You can't fix something when you don't know how it works.
Mhm.
So it makes a lot of sense to understand what grief does to our minds and our bodies,
Yeah.
so that we can then find a solution. For me, it was finding somebody called David Kessler, and he talked about the 6 things researchers have found we need.
Yeah.
And they range from um, having your grief witnessed by somebody else, so your pain validated. The
Mhm.
second one is about finding good, healthy ways to express your grief. The third one is old wounds, maybe coping mechanisms we developed as children that are actually stopping us moving forward. There's usually guilt attached with grief of some sort because our brains want to control the situation, and we can't control death. We've never been able to control death. And then you've also got intertwining the love and the pain. So I work with people to make sure that the pain and the love work together to make grief more bearable. And the last one is meaning and purpose, which we are both done. But
Yeah.
very much the more of those 6 you've done, the better it is.
Yeah.
So Jane, take us through what the brain does, or how thoughts start at the top and work our way, because you've got
Start
your
at the
little
top
stick
and
man
work down.
now.
I'm
Oh, you've
just
got
going
a
to
stick
touch
man.
on a couple of things that you said though,
Yeah.
Trace. When you said about nursing someone, obviously I had that experience with my mum. And I
Yeah.
think now that I've kind of, I know this, delved into death and dying a bit more,
Yeah.
it's understanding that actually we do lose people twice, but
Yeah.
even people who are going through that process with, you know, possibly hospice care, dementia, that kind of thing, it's understanding that that is anticipatory grief as
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
And it is the same.
Yeah.
It's grief as itself.
Yeah.
And there's no don't talk about it, don't do that, you know, express yourself at the anticipatory grief stage as well,
Yeah.
and get an understanding that actually we can help you through that process as well.
Yes.
So that was one thing that I picked up when you were talking. Sorry, I've gone kind of, yeah,
No, no, no,
off,
it's
off,
absolutely fine.
off on a tangent. And
It's okay.
the other thing that you mentioned something about growing as people and finding our purpose. We've both done that.
Yeah.
And what I always remind people is we don't lose grief. Grief is with us for the rest of our days.
Yeah.
But as we grow, that grief gets smaller. And I think, you know,
Yeah.
you mentioned David
Yeah.
Kessler, and a lot of his things is about honoring that
Yes.
person
Yeah.
or whatever it is that you've lost. Because I know you said you're more people orientated, but
Yeah.
with the self-development side, it links back to both. It can be a thing, you know, a
Yeah.
car, a job,
Yes.
whatever.
Yeah.
So grief has a huge place in, and the guilt and the anger is definitely a big one.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm going to explain a little bit why that happens when we talk in a minute. So
Right. So
that'll
I've
be good.
jumped ahead. I'm not going to jump ahead too much.
No,
I'll
that's
try
fine.
to, but I think probably the easiest way for me to start is to if I asked people watching, listening to think of a tall building in Paris.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm assuming most people, and I know we should never assume, but most people would have, I'm hoping, have thought about the Eiffel Tower.
Well, you asked me that question, and I straight away had the Eiffel Tower in my head, didn't I? So
Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah.
exactly. So you actually saw that image of the Eiffel Tower. You
Yeah.
saw that tall building in Paris. And the other thing, one of the other things to say is, which way does your fridge door open? Does it open to the left or does it open to the right?
Must be, well, my right, your left.
Yeah. So, but you went into your mind,
Yeah.
you walked through your house
Yeah.
and into your kitchen, and you opened your fridge door. So that's just sort of like a way of sort of explaining that our mind actually works in images.
Yes. Yeah.
So what we need to do is get images into our head. So I think, you know, it's easy to sort of say, oh, I'm going to have a positive day today. I'm going to be great today. We need to be positive all the time. We can't be positive all the time. 100% you can switch, but we have thoughts every 16 seconds.
Yeah.
So every 16 seconds there's thoughts going through our minds, and it's understanding that we can make them positive, but it's training your brain, to your mind, and your mindset to actually be in that, what we call as a trough of positivity.
Yeah.
You can
I've
often jump out, but
Yeah,
sometimes you have to just deal with what's going on, but jump back into that trough.
yeah.
So I hope that little bit's made sense.
Yeah,
And
and the only thing I'd like to add to that is our brains are actually negatively wired. So
yes,
we are fighting that bias. So it is a learning habit. It's not something that will come naturally.
yeah.
Yeah.
So then you go into sort of the habits and beliefs that we have that we've
Yes. Yeah.
we've got from growing up.
Yeah.
As a child, we're open to anything that's going on in the world, in the
Yeah.
environment that we're growing up in, and then our mind closes. I'm going to get the little stick man.
Yeah.
You want me to do this bit now, and then we can. So
Yeah.
this
Good
this
do.
is this is the stick man, and this is what my mentor Kim Calvert uses a lot. Her mentor used it before that,
Okay.
and so this I call him Bob because this is the stick. Bob Proctor was Kim's mentor.
Okay.
So these 5 things here are the senses. So sight, hearing, taste, touch, and smell.
Okay.
This is our head, our mind,
Yeah.
and obviously the body. So our mind is huge. So thoughts at the top, all of the thoughts that go through our mind is what
Yeah.
thoughts, and then feelings, all the feelings in our mind. But we get to choose what thoughts transfer into feelings.
Yeah.
So we call this like the bouncer.
Okay.
So, it's what ticket goes through into the feelings to create the actions in our body. And
Yeah.
I think we had this conversation, Tracy, about the brain being the hardware,
Yes.
whereas the mind's the software.
Yeah.
And we get to choose what software we do. We create our reality by updating our own software.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah. And that
I'll let
goes
you
really
describe a bit more about that.
it's really good because the senses are connected to our brain so that when we have an associate our brains work on patterns. Everything in our body is balanced on patterns, and our brains work on patterns, and all of those senses send thought, create a thought because we have experience associated with it. So as we grow, our brain goes, oh, when I do that, that happens. So we learn through those experiences. So our brain predicts that pattern's going to happen. And there's actually two parts of our brain because one part predicts and works on muscle memory. And the other part is what I call, so you've got your reality map and your virtual map. So your reality map is your muscle memory. And then sorry, that's your virtual map. But your reality map is when something different happens. So generally, if you smell something, see something, hear something, it will set off a memory, and that's a reflex. That's not actually a thought.
Yeah,
Whereas a thought would be, oh, today I'm going out for coffee. I'm going to smell lovely coffee. So the
yeah,
two are very different, and this is where the grief waves actually come in because the grief waves are actually the reflect from a smell or a sound we hear. We can't actually stop that, but what we can do is bring in a thought with that, a loving thought to
yeah,
protect the rest of that pain, to bring that pain level down. So
yeah,
the senses are really important for building those regular, as children, building those regular patterns for the brain to go, oh, well, when I eat this, this happens. So
hmm,
we need that. But when grief comes along, those patterns all go haywire. None of
yeah,
them work in harmony at all. So the brain is actually all the normal neurons, all the normal pathways are all mixed up. The messages don't know where they're going. That's why we get our brain fog and we don't feel right. We have lots of headache. And actually, we get physically quite unwell sometimes as well.
yeah,
But generally, that's what happens when our senses are set off by a trigger. And triggers are actually heartwarming because it connects us to that person. Rather than being a frightening thing, it's actually a
yeah,
connection to the people we've lost. So we need to remember that as well. But yeah, those senses are more a reflex than they are a thought because
yeah,
it's to do with our muscle memory and things like that. So we have to be aware of what might set us off. But
yeah,
that's how the brain works with these two maps together. But we have to remember there was an experiment done by a lady. I can't remember her name. I should have remembered. But what they did was they had mice in a box, and there was a blue tower in that box. And every day the mice would go and get food from the blue box, the blue tower. They removed the blue tower, and it took the mice something like 5 days to realize that tower had gone because of the two parts of the brain. Now, if you think it took the mice 5 days to realize that blue tower had gone, how long do you think it's going to take for the two patterns in our brain to actually come back and rectify themselves so we can function properly? And
Yeah.
that's what happens in grief. Those two halves aren't working together properly.
Yeah. And I think that kind of relates to, obviously, with Bob, the conscious mind and the subconscious mind.
Yes.
So it's very similar the way you've described it,
Mm.
in the fact that the conscious mind is where everything takes place, but the subconscious mind is actually what creates our reality.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
we get to put in what we want to put in. And
Yes.
I was smiling when you mentioned triggers, because everybody talks about triggers. And I had this on Sunday.
Okay.
I went to a family funeral. I've got funerals on the brain. Family christening, a
Yeah.
fabulous
Christening.
celebration of
The
birth
other
and
end.
life.
Yeah. Christening.
And that was over in where we used to go. Obviously, Jonathan used to come to all the family things and things. And
Yeah.
I drove past this sign on the side of the road. There's a place called Stony Heap in Durham.
Okay.
And we used to giggle every time, because Jonathan was like, the first time he saw the sign, he was like, Stony Heap, who calls the place Stony Heap? I know this is totally distracting from what we're talking about, Tracy, but
That's all right. No, that's
it,
fine. You're
it
spilling your
was
trigger.
it was the trigger. Now, had that happened 18 months ago, I probably would have had to stop the car and had a major emotional outburst of tears
Mm.
and maybe uncontrollable sort of breathing and things. But because I've worked on the mind, I was able to smile and
Yeah.
think about that laughter that we had in the car at that
Yeah.
name.
Yeah.
And
And that's intertwining the pain and the love that I was talking
yeah,
about. Very much so.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly that. So it's just an example to sort of try and make people
Yes.
understand a little bit more as to,
Yeah.
how powerful our mind actually is.
Yes. Yes. It's a massive computer that we will never understand completely, but we
No,
can understand what we do know, and that can make a difference.
yeah, we can understand how we feed it. It's
Yes.
feeding ourselves, and we all know to eat healthily, don't
Yeah.
we? We all know how to, what foods we should be eating, but nobody teaches us what we should be feeding our mind to help
Yes.
ourselves. So that was a a wake up call for me. There's no thinking class in school, is there? So
No.
we just kind of go along with the flow, and yeah, we
I've what I found really, really difficult not long after I lost my godmother was I just couldn't concentrate. I couldn't juggle everything. And I was thinking, I should be able to juggle all this. Why can't I juggle all this? I run a home, I run a family, I've got grandkids, da, 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 da. And actually, I had to just give myself a break and go, look, I can't manage this at the moment.
mm,
I've had a huge shock. Let's just step back and look at what I can do and be kind to myself.
yeah,
And that's the first time I've ever sort of gone, actually, I need to think about this. Normally, I just go hell for leather into life, deal with the
mm,
grandkids, deal with the children, da, 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 da. But actually, it was good for me because it did actually make me step back and go, I've got to get some support for this.
yeah,
I can't manage this by myself.
yeah,
And it's all very well having family around you, but they don't, they're either grieving themselves or they don't really understand what you're going through. And the only people that will get it are others that have been through what you've been through.
yeah. And I think, that was for me. I've got a great support network of friends. I've got a great support network family wise. We're a very
Mm,
close knit family. Um, but it was finding that one thing that you could actually, because I was quite angry
yeah.
because of everything that had happened in such a short space of time. Sometimes you don't want to talk to a family member or a friend because, like you say, they're dealing with their own grief.
Yeah.
And no, you don't understand what I'm going through unless you've been through it yourself. And I have actually said that to people now. They'll go, "Oh, it'll be hard today. It'll be, it's, your mum's birthday, or
Yeah.
there's things coming up. It's your anniversary. It's Christmas. Yes, those days are hard,
Yeah.
Yeah. And, but you can cope. You can put
Yeah.
those strategies in place. And like I was saying before, create the happy memories and bring those people to the forefront of what you're doing. So they're still actually part of the celebration by remembering them.
Yes. Yeah, and a lot of things I teach my client is about be proactive. If you know something's coming up, decide what you want to do that day. Don't wake up that morning and go, what am I going to do? Because it will all go wrong. You
Mhm.
need to know that coming up to that day, perhaps I ought to try doing X, Y, Z just to make my day better. Or I'll be busy all day. Make a decision about what you're going to do so
Mhm.
that it's not thrown at you. Don't so if it does go a bit pear-shaped, you know how you're going to handle it. And that's
Yeah.
going to make it, I don't know other people, but I find if I'm pre-prepped and I know what I'm going to do if it goes wrong, then it's all right. It always goes okay. But if I haven't pre-prepped it, it all just falls apart, and actually you feel like the world's full night of underneath you.
Yeah.
So at least if you're pre-prepared for a situation or a day like that, it can make it easier. It's not going to be easier in pain, but it will be a better day because you know what you're going to do.
Yeah. And to be fair, if you want to lie in bed all day and just lie and
That's
read,
okay.
and that's fine.
Yeah.
That's what I keep saying to people. If you want a bed day, that's fine. You don't have to stick to, I hate the
Yeah.
word process. I know I use the scientific process of the mind, but process in the form of it's a process we all go
Yeah.
through, because that's an end point. There
Yeah.
is no end point. It's a
No.
we really should say continual process.
I call it an adjustment.
Yes.
So,
So,
because like when you move house or you get married, it's all adjustments we make in our life, and this is another natural process, adjustment that we need to learn to manage.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's no. Well, I'm pleased I found self-development and found myself again. And I know it's been a very, I've briefly gone, it's so much more than just the stick man and the thoughts. The same with what you said about the brain. I'm sure there's more top tips you can give us as well,
Oh,
Tracy.
oh, there is, but this is just a little explanation of how we can change our
Yeah,
lives ourselves if we take control of what we want to learn.
yeah,
So how do you connect the body with that at all? Because obviously there's a lot that goes on in the body with us, because when we have extra cortisol in the body through stress, through grief, that then damps down our parasympathetic system, which calms everything, keeps all the patterns running at the normal level. And
yeah,
there's lots of things we can do, but our brains and our bodies and our bodies and our brains are connected. And what we put in then affects the brain. And what
yeah,
our thoughts are, as you've said, affects how our body feels. And
yeah,
I know when we have too much cortisol in our body, we don't want to eat, we feel tired all the time, we just don't want to do anything, we have got no clarity in our brain at all. And to bring that cortisol level back down very often means expressing your grief, getting your grief witnessed, a huge exercise, massive exercise, dopamine blank will bring back your parasympathetic. But we
yeah,
have to know that information to know, right, I haven't eaten for 22 hours because of, say, losing somebody. Perhaps I just need some soup, even if I can
yeah,
only manage two mouthfuls. It will wake your immune system back up because very often the immune system shuts down. And
yes,
then the majority of, I think it's 80% of people after they've lost somebody will get an illness because the immune system has shut down through the shock of what's happened
mm,
and the stress. And we need to wake that back up to protect our health and to help
yeah,
us manage our grief journey better. It's a really important thing. So, eating, sleeping, socializing, we don't feel like doing, but actually, we don't realize how much that lights up our brain when we
yeah,
connect with somebody else.
yeah,
And all of those things are just really important. I call them the four pillars. You've got exercise, socializing, sleeping, and nutrition are the four things. If you can't do anything else when you're grieving, just do those four things because they will keep your body and your mind ticking over till such a point when you can begin to think a bit clearer again. So
yeah,
important those are.
yeah. And I think they are huge. It's fine me talking about the mind, but if you haven't got the four pillars that you're talking about, if your body's not right
Yeah.
and you're not feeding it and nurturing it, then you are going to feel rubbish. You're not going to want to get out of bed in the morning. Me sitting there going, oh, do a bit of gratitude and help yourself and do this. So, um, the mind is, like I said, the mind does control the body,
Yeah.
but the brain controls what the body, the body, like the sign, like you were on about how the cortisol and things. I'm not a
No,
scientist
but the
as
cortisol
a
stress. Yeah.
biologist as such, but
Yeah.
the scientific side of it, you know,
Yes.
we if you don't water the garden, the plants won't grow in the summer. So if you don't feed the body, then it's not going to be able to. You could work on the mind all day, but if you're not getting all the nutrients and all the goodness into what you're going to produce from your thoughts, then
Yes.
it's not going to help you. Um,
Exactly. But those healthy habits are just so important, because even if we've got those in place before grief, we will fare better than if we
yes,
haven't got them in place before grief. So it's as simple as the best thing is sleep. Sleep's the one thing that goes out of the window when we lose somebody. We just cannot sleep
yes,
because the patterns are all over the place. And it's just so important to do a brain dump before you go to sleep. And if you
yeah,
have a regular bedtime, even if you don't sleep, your body will know it's time to rest.
yes,
Whether that pattern's there or not, the body will just tend to naturally, because of muscle memory, relax at that time of night. So the best thing to do
yeah,
is still go to bed, even if you're wide awake, but either read a book or just lie with the lights off so your body is resting.
yeah,
Grief, the fatigue that comes with grief, the tiredness because of everything the body's doing and it's fighting itself.
mhm,
We
yeah,
just really need that sleep, and sleep is such a big thing for getting up in the morning and dealing with your day the following day.
yeah,
And if you can manage just one of those four things, or have those just four healthy habits in place, your grief journey will be much better. I think
yeah,
it's 70% better or something. It's a huge statistic if you've got those healthy habits in place.
yeah. And sleep is huge for the mind as well.
Yeah.
But what we do need to remember is, like you said, the brain dump before bed is absolutely amazing,
Yeah.
because our mind still works while we're sleeping, because it works 24 hours a day,
Mm,
as does the body, as does everything else.
yeah.
But a lot of people don't realize whatever you're putting into your mind just before you fall asleep is what your brain, your mind is working on overnight. So if you go to bed angry, emotional, whatever, you are going
Yeah.
to wake up angry, emotional, whatever. And then it's just like a roller coaster. You jump out of bed, you stub your toe,
Yes.
you're
Yeah.
angry again. And then you come downstairs, the kids have spilt the milk all over the bench when they've been trying to get their own cereal.
Yeah.
And it's just, but then you're on that negative plane within your thoughts and your
Yeah.
feeling. You're in the negative feeling, full stop. I mean, I'm not relating this to grief, but it is, if you
It can
start with a
happen.
negative thing, if start with that negative feeling, it will continue. If you don't suddenly go, I jump out of bed and I stub my toe, but actually that's fine. Everything's going to be good today. And
Yeah.
that's sometimes all it takes. Everything's going to be fine today.
Mm,
I've got a smile on my face, and then, you start the small, simple steps to
yeah.
keep feeding that thoughts and feelings.
You're totally right, because the thoughts affect the rest of our day.
Yeah.
So if you get out of bed and you stub your toe in the morning, the best thing to do is sit, breathe, maybe
Mm.
think of a happy memory. I mean, sometimes I hate to admit to this, sometimes I will get on Instagram and watch dog videos just because they make me laugh. And then that changes your mindset straight away to the
Yeah.
rest of the day. And
Yeah.
again, what you're saying about changing our thoughts, if we automatically sit there and then go, right, the rest of the day is not going to be bad. It's going to be fine. We're going to be good. This is just a one off. I've stubbed my toe. Silly me. Let's move forward.
Yeah.
You are right. And that's showing exactly how we can change our thought process rather
Yeah.
than catastrophizing and going into the rest of the day, going, oh, the rest of the day is going to be, may as well write the rest of the day off. It's going to be awful. I may as well not go to work. Da, 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 da. And then
Yeah.
you get this negative spiral, don't you? Like you're talking about, very much
Yeah.
so. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it is just the simple things, you know, it, as much as we are complicated human beings,
Hmm.
we are quite simple to, you know, actually, we can do a lot of work ourselves to help
Yeah.
ourselves.
Yes.
But for me, on this grief journey, you have to be acceptant of help,
Yes.
support, and guidance. it's fine me saying, oh, you can switch your mindset, you can do all this. But if you do want to make the change and take those steps, it won't matter what I say to you. You know, we've talked about the switching your positive, you know, into your negative into positive.
Yeah.
If you don't want to do it, that's fine. Sit in your funk all day and, you know, just do that. Some days you
Yeah.
might have to do that anyway.
Yeah.
I'm not taking anything away from that. If that's what you feel like you need to do, that's fine. But yeah,
I
it
think it's finding a break from that negativity as well sometimes, because when my voice was going round and round my head after I lost my godmother, and it was just giving, it was just going on and on and on. It was like, will you please shut up? I used to, for me, going and reading a book took me, my brain was occupied with something else. It was another world. I wasn't here.
yeah,
That really gave my brain a break so that I could actually relax and stop. And the other thing I found was, because I do sewing, dressmaking and stuff, concentrating on a task that needed my whole brain then meant
yes,
it wasn't going, she's not here. What about, how's my godfather? Is he okay? My brain wasn't doing that. It was just so solely focused on one thing. And it gave my anxiety levels a break. It helped me just and we all have things we love doing that give us that downtime.
yeah,
It might be journaling for some people. Some people might
yeah,
find when they start writing a story or they just journal their thoughts, perhaps that gives them peace. But it's finding that it's the dark and the light. It's finding that time out from grief
yeah,
as well, isn't it? It's finding
yeah,
that balance of the low and the high together, and managing your grief in a way that's healthy for you.
yeah. And you know, finding the mentorship and understanding. I've actually written two books now. Um,
Amazing.
and when I think I'm just going to put this was the first one. This was part of, because I know it's back to front one.
That's
So
okay. I'm going to put it in the comments in the bottom anyway,
yeah.
Jamie.
So this was, I hadn't really thought about it until I've gone. This was like 6 months into mentorship, because obviously we set goals as to where we want to be in a certain period of time,
Yeah.
and these are all tools that I talk through in more depth. So my goal was to write a book. I'd always wanted to write a book. And when I look back, it's all about my childhood and growing up. So
Ah,
I know that was my grieving process and my brain dump for my mum.
yeah.
You know, I had an
Yes.
amazing childhood growing up. And like you were saying about the journaling, I do journal, but that's a fairly new thing to me. But writing that was like, actually, I'm not saying everybody needs to go out and write a book, but we do all have a story that we can tell and a story that we can write.
Yeah.
Sit down and write it for yourself.
Yeah, and I think
Helps
that
to
goes
sort of,
really well with meaning and purpose, because some people start charities, they do great big things. Actually, it doesn't have to be a great big thing. It could be as small as planting a tree for somebody,
yes,
or
yeah,
writing about your memories with your mum, like
yeah,
you've done. It's personal to you. It doesn't have to be a great big ostentatious, this is my meaning and purpose. It can be something
yeah,
a lot smaller that fulfills a need. And I
yeah,
think there's something about writing about memories and writing about people we love. There's something very therapeutic about that brings those levels back down to a level, and we get the clarity from them as well.
yeah. And I think a lot of it, you know, obviously my kids were both teenagers when they lost their dad. And you know, I was nearly 50 when I lost my mum, and my dad's still here. So I can't. It's hard to think that, you know, I'm 40 years older than them, and they've lost those 40 years with their dad.
Yeah.
And I do get that, you know, part of them probably, you know, well, I'm actually going to say it. I was trying to think of a better way to say it, is might
Okay.
forget who their dad was, which is
Mm,
why I've said to them, you need to keep talking about your dad. You need to, you
yeah.
know, keep sharing things. And the same goes for us, as, you know, talk about the person, share their memories, talk about the laughter you
Mm.
had with friends, that kind of thing. So yeah,
That's why
I've
I love memory boxes, because if a
yeah,
family does a memory box together, every member of that family will have a different memory.
yeah,
And some of the other family members will go, "Well, I didn't know that." So
Yes.
it opens up a whole chain of supporting one another
Yeah.
and enjoying those memories. So maybe if you haven't got such a strong memory of remembering, somebody else might be able to describe a memory to you, and then and I also find with my clients when I suggest a memory box, we just write down a few memories, but they'll come back to me a week later and go, "Well, that opened the floodgates. Then I had this, that, and this," and they've got so many memories then that they'd forgotten because either they were caring for them or nursing them, or and that nursing them tends to block out those memories sometimes. So we need to bring those back, and that can take a bit of exercise and work.
Yeah. And I think going back to my book, when my brother read it, he was like, "Did we really do all of that?" And I
Yeah.
was like, "Yes." And I said, "Did it help you?" And he's like, "Oh, it was amazing." And he says it has, because he really struggled. Um, you know, it was tough for him because he actually lives there, like on the farm where mum and dad were. So
Yeah.
he found it really hard. And I was like, "Well, did it help you?" And he's like, "Yeah, actually it did, but without realizing." More so now when he said, like he's read it, same as me, the realization that actually that did help. So, so yeah,
Yeah. No, that's amazing. That actually just shows how different everybody's unique grief is. Grief is
yeah,
unique to everybody because your grief would have been different to your brother's, yet it was both your mum.
yeah,
So you will remember things he doesn't remember, and he'll remember things you didn't remember. So that's why all our grief journeys are totally unique. I mean, when we lost my father-in-law, my husband grieved differently to me,
yeah,
although we'd lost the same person. So that's why sometimes we do need to talk to somebody outside of the family. We can talk together, but also
yeah,
sometimes to talk to somebody outside makes it easier as well. So
yeah. And I think just having a different perspective, because if you
yeah.
talk to friends, there's almost like there's a little bit of you kind of going, "Oh, I can't do that, I can't say that, they'll think this, they'll think that," which also links back to your mind, because actually it doesn't really matter what other people think if you're happy thinking what you're thinking.
Yes. It's
And
exactly like you said, if you wanna stay in bed all day, do grief your way. Don't do it anybody else's way, do it your way.
yeah, there's no right and wrong.
No, there isn't. No. There's only right and wrong for you, yourself. What
Yes.
is a healthy way for you and what is not a healthy way.
Yeah. I mean, obviously
Yeah.
you've got to live. You've got to feed
Yeah.
yourself, you've got to drink, you've got to. But if you want to have a duvet day, have a duvet day.
Yeah. And I think that's really important because we've been through such a huge, massive change in the body and the mind. That I mean, it's a bit like teenagers when they go through puberty. No wonder they're like they are because of all the changes in the body, and
Yeah,
we get those changes when we go through grief, so we need to be kind to our bodies and our minds and rest them and
yeah.
support them and do all the things we need to do. So, yeah. So, that's been really, really great, Jane. Is there anything else you want to sort of touch on of that we've not touched on?
I don't. Well, I could talk all day.
Well, we won't encourage that then.
Is there anything specific that you want me to kind of delve into that's kind of um I think probably the big thing for me is the acceptance that it's okay to move on. Not, and I
To
hate
move
using the
forward.
word
I
move
use move
on, move forward, but it's okay to be whoever you want to be. You're
Yes.
the only person you can control. And if it's something that you think somebody else is going to be affected by, do it if you want to do it. It's got nothing to do with them. You deal with you. You are
Yeah.
that person. You are the only person you can control. So forget
Yeah.
about everybody else. I know that I'm not saying forget about everybody else and just, go off on your
No, no.
holidays, but you know what I mean. Just
Yeah.
be you,
Self-care
control
first.
yourself and work on you
Yeah.
is what I would say.
Yeah, self-care first is just so important when we're grieving because we can't help anybody else around us till we're feeling more ourselves.
Yeah,
And I think when we lose, particularly a family member, that when that identity goes, we do lose part of ourselves and we've got to reinvent ourselves. And we need time to rediscover ourselves then, don't we? And to remember, oh, yeah, that actually is me. or this is
Yeah.
part of them, this is part of me. We have to refine, particularly when we lose a spouse. I think there's a huge redefinition that happens over that period of time, because
Yeah.
we're no longer two circles intertwined. We're one circle with some
Mhm.
influences from there, but
Yeah.
that circle is ours. We now have to sort out that whole circle. We're not sharing it with somebody. So
Yes.
that's a whole redefinition of how our world functions and works.
Mhm.
So that's really, really important. And it's just really good that you said about doing grief your way, and I always say move forward with our loved ones with us. So
Yeah.
we're going forward, taking them with us, showing
Yeah.
them what we're capable of now, what we're doing now, so that depending on your beliefs, when you meet them later, you've got so much to talk about.
Yeah.
There's all that, and I think it's a really, because I speak to a lot of people who've lost parents, and they say, I just don't feel them there anymore. Well, build that connection back, build that
Yeah.
closeness back. They're still there cheering you on. It's just an adjustment in the relationship.
Yeah.
They're telling you they're still here with triggers and things that go off.
Yeah.
They're still backing you. They're just backing you in a different way. So
Yeah.
when you change that perception on it, we'd never lose our loved ones. We just move forward, taking them with us.
Yeah.
We wouldn't want to move on and leave somebody we love behind. Nobody would do that.
No. No.
So you are right, that I always say moving forward, taking our loved ones with us, because I
Yeah.
think that then we think, yes, it's okay to go forward because we're going with them,
Yeah.
you know. So it does
Totally.
change the perception a little bit, which is quite a nice one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No.
so that's generally, I think, pretty good. I can't think there's anything else that we need to really add to that. We've talked about healthy habits, we've talked about your self-development, we've talked about Bob the Stick Man. Don't think we talked about grief waves, anger and sadness we talked about, which is part of the reflex and the muscle
Yeah.
memory because of the associations with it. Oh, yeah, one thing I wanted to say, if people are really struggling with loneliness and sadness and anger, sometimes it can be down to the muscle memory again with the routine. So if you
Yeah.
do the same routine that you had when you had your spouse or husband there, or when your parent was there, changing up the routine can then distract the brain into a new pattern. So
Yeah.
that can often help. That's another strategy that I often offer people as well, is to change your daily routine. So you're
Yeah.
not getting those reminders so much of, oh, we would normally have a cup of tea now. Maybe, I don't know, maybe do yoga before you have your cup of tea, or walk just change your routine around, because that can then help with some of the sadness and the loneliness that goes on immediately afterwards.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if I probably haven't mentioned it this time, but I will quickly just mention, when we meet people, and particularly when we meet our soulmates, our brains light up. There's a natural high that occurs in the brain with the love hormones.
Yeah.
And when we lose somebody, it's like coming off a drug. So if you think of us as a drug addict through grief, actually it takes time. You have
Mhm.
all these symptoms that go with it, and you'll always be a drug addict, but you learn to manage it. And I think that's a really good example of the withdrawal symptoms we get, and the sadness and the anger and the having to adjust
Yeah.
is the same as a drug addict coming off a drug. And the natural high in our brain is always there, which is why human connection is so important when we lose somebody, because we won't meet another soulmate, but we'll meet somebody else that's on our brain wave,
Yeah.
that will give us like part of, if you like, that's lower levels, so that we feel better, but we still miss that person, but we do start to feel better. So each and every day, I'm starting to feel better. So
Yeah.
it is that sort of process. That's what I liken it to, because people say to me, but I miss them so much. And I say, that's because you're not getting that natural high in your brain, and you were in love with them.
Yeah.
They did things for you. They gave your body a reward, which is the scientific side, which is what happens.
Yeah.
So that explains then why we miss them so much and why we feel so lonely. And then
Yeah.
that adjusts so that we're okay then with our own time. So there's
Yes.
so much science behind grief
Yeah.
that can really help us if we understand our grief and we understand what's going to happen and what is happening.
Yeah.
So you're so right with the self-development. And I'd be really interested if we could have another coffee another time to hear more about, and maybe delve into a particular aspect a bit deeper.
Yeah, and that's absolutely fine. I mean, obviously, my first three steps were who am I, and where am I going? So that's one of the
That sounds
first kind of
amazing.
like starters for the whole process. And it's basically getting you mentioned about the routine. I mean,
Yeah.
I've totally shaken up my whole routine. I'm up,
Yeah.
si- I would say, silly o'clock in the morning for me because I used to like to lie in bed. But I'm up early in the morning now, and I've got my own routine. I've got my daily disciplines. You know, that kind of thing. So it's just having those little, I think the big one for me was accountability and finding that person who was guiding me.
Yes.
Because at
Yeah.
that particular point in time, it doesn't have to be me, it doesn't have to be Tracy, as much as we would love to speak to you.
Yes.
You need to find the person that's right for you. And all
Yeah.
I will say is talk to somebody and share what you're going through. There is somebody out there for you that will help you.
Yeah. And I agree with that completely. And my tagline is grief is permanent, but suffering is optional.
Yeah,
You choose how you suffer. More knowledge is power. The more knowledge you have, the more you will understand your grief journey, and it will be smoother. Won't be easier, but it will be smoother, which is different. So
yeah.
yeah. So brilliant. Lovely, Jane. Thank you very much. Lovely to talk to you today.
Lovely. Thank you for having me.